we're back online here. So yeah, but it seems, I mean, one of the benefits I get from doing these kinds of exercises, that makes me think through, or begin to think through some important issues, including the fact that basically, the most important client is? The most important client customer are governments, right? Including like the Defense Department of the United States, and national security agencies. They're critically important customers, clients, around which corporations and nonprofit organizations coalesce and respond. So this virtual reality, for it to become really important, somehow has to be seen as important regarding, I think it has to have security implications, law enforcement implications, monitoring implications, particularly in regard to, for example, protecting the internet from hacking, from fraud, from along with this vast expanse of digital services and online functions. It's a big focus in the Trump and Hampton Turner chapters 18 and 19 on going digital. That these gathering personal data. I mean, I'm thinking on my feet right now, because this is what vision involves. What is the world going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? How is this technology going to develop? What will people be using it for? When I say security, what do I mean? What's virtual reality going to be doing in terms of security? Of training, I mentioned training. What about, again, looking for hackers, people? The Web3 is the big focus, right? The development of virtual reality, cryptocurrency. I mean, because Korea is all about, South Koreans are big into cryptocurrency. Why is cryptocurrency important? Cryptocurrency's been kind of a skeptical topic of focus because it's seen as somehow associated with illegal activity where you don't want your identity to be known. Maybe it could be, engage in the dark web, like engaging in criminal purchasing of illegal products. But keep in mind, something like up to 1/3 of the world economy is in the gray and black field economy. 1/3, when you include money laundering, trafficking in drugs, trafficking in people, smuggling, violating sanctions that the United States puts on Russia. I mean, this is a huge part of the global economy. And so cryptocurrency and Web3 is really important for that part of the economy. And that's potentially why it's really valuable, because it's not just so-called criminal activity. It's also opposing what some people might view as basically American oppression and dominance. American hegemony is not benign if you're living in Iraq, in Iran, or you're living in Afghanistan now. I mean, and so one way to oppose America's efforts to impose its will around the world, to oppose that, is through engaging in dark web activities, right? And then, of course, America favors some oligarchs and corrupt individuals over others. So America is putting sanctions on Russian oligarchs that support Putin. But what about America's friends in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates? I mean, or Jordan, those ruling elites in those traditional monarchies are incredibly corrupt at a level that we cannot even comprehend. But those are okay because they're our friends. But if they're friends of Putin, they're bad. And so if you know this and I know this, I can come up with a justification or explanation of why I want to engage in cryptocurrency, right? Because I'm somehow circumventing or avoiding American dominance and oppression, but at least in a self-serving way as I try to make more money for myself. But okay, so back to the cyber campus, and we go to vote. So Kritika, what are your views on this? Where do you put yourself on this scale? Yes, the big tech one. Can you come up here and use the, I mean, I could get up, but I'm afraid I'm gonna knock over this table. Oh, I don't know this, no, sorry, I shouldn't bother you. This doesn't, I'm sorry, I'm old and confused, sorry, I apologize. So what were you saying? And speak so that we can hear you through the computer. So unmute yourself. Katika? But you're not coming through the computer.
Okay, so I was saying that I'm neutral because sometimes it feels like the customers are being taken into consideration for like big tech companies, but there are times when it feels like they are only optimizing their own profit and thinking about their own success.
So you're neutral because the companies are only optimizing their own success. You don't think they have the capability to determine what people want?
No, I'm saying sometimes they do that and sometimes they don't.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I'm neutral.
Yeah. Okay. And Moon, Miss Moon, what do you think? Speak through the, so we can hear you through the. Are you unmuted? Unmute yourself so we can hear you. I can't hear you. Okay, now I can. Go.
Probably, yeah, talking about the vision is more important than ever.
Loudly. Go ahead, go ahead.
But, I think the vision is more important than customer preference and permanent operations because of may I have more time to think about this topic.
Okay. Okay, so vote as to your view on this, and agree or neutral cannot decide. So, but again, this is it really shows the role of governments in providing this vision. I think it's increasingly important in a globalizing world. Because globalization doesn't happen just naturally. It happens because governments make it happen. And that means government biases and government preferences reflecting Washington's preferences or Beijing's preferences are there. Interdependence is inevitable. We're all more and more aware of how interdependent we are, but how we respond to interdependence, our growing awareness of interdependence, that's globalization. How do we respond to the growing salience and intensity of the awareness of interdependence? That is what globalization is, the response to it. And Europeanization, like we talked about in European politics class, that's one form of globalization. That Europe responds by Europeanizing the member states. Okay, okay, so let me open up the notes on my computer and go back to chapter 18 and 19 of Trompenaars and Hampton Turner and make sure that these notes are open. And okay, so the ultimate differentiator of survival, corporate survival, is the ability to constantly renew creative solutions. It is so because competitors can copy and replicate old ideas at ever lower cost in this increasingly oligopolistic world. So oligopolistic world means controlled by more and more concentrated capital. And of course, states play an important role in concentrating that capital. And therefore, building a culture of innovation is the #1 management imperative. And they mentioned that human resources must play a critical role here. So HR, that's short for human resources. And because through human resources, you increase the diversity of the people working for your company. And by increasing the diversity, you increase the cultural differentiation and representation in the company, which the reconciliation of those differing cultural values and attitudes, they claim is the essence for being innovative in a globalizing world economy. Okay, so an overall framework is necessary to integrate recruitment, selection, and the retention of creative talent on the one hand, with product and process innovation on the other hand, along with research on corporate culture and corporate mechanistic and structural approaches to innovation. Since we're running out of time, I want to emphasize this important point. Human resources, I'm an old person, so I'm going to be 60 in a month and a half. Human resources department, that is traditionally considered to be kind of a second-class assignment in a corporation. Human resources, when I became an adult, was considered kind of a second class. I already said second class, kind of a inferior position within an organization. It's where you went if you're not really going to ever be in charge of your company. Human resources meant you were responsible for looking for talent, hiring people. However, having said that, in the last 40 years, human resource departments have become really, really more important. And they become really, really more important because they're also responsible for dealing with questions of or allegations of harassment and discrimination on the basis of gender or race. So if in a company, it's now standard practice in big companies that if, say, for example, a female working for the company thinks her boss, a male, is pressuring her for sexual favors, she has to file a complaint. And she has to file a complaint in a way that will not get her in trouble for filing the complaint. Because if you file a complaint and it becomes public, your likelihood of being able to proceed in that profession is undermined because you get labeled as somebody who's controversial. And companies and organizations don't like hiring controversial people. I know this from my own experience. I mean, not because of sexual harassment, but when you get in trouble in a company, for whatever the reasons, and you try to find another position, another company, they will contact your previous employer. And if they get any word from your previous employer that somehow you were a source of disruption, even if it's because you were picked on and abused, they're not going to hire you. So these human resource departments have had to develop policies and procedures for receiving complaints of harassment and then investigating and adjudicating the complaints and keeping them quiet, keeping them confidential until they are resolved. And you can imagine how sensitive this is. Of course, it's very sensitive. Yoon Suk Yeol became president of South Korea partly in reaction against these feminist movements that are really pushing for these human resource departments, these HR departments in these companies to implement and oversee procedures for responding to complaints of sexual harassment or pressure by their bosses. And like I said, this is a big change in the role of HR from the time I became an adult to the present. But they go on to highlight here, an overall framework is necessary to integrate recruitment, selection, and retention of creative talent on the one hand, with product and process innovation on the other hand, along with research on corporate culture and corporate mechanisms. I already covered this. So on the one hand, increasing standardization characterizes the world, along with, on the other hand, ever-increasing diversity. And of course, the objective of this textbook is to show how to connect these two extremes. It is the essence of innovation. Leadership's challenge is to join what we share and where we differ. So Western education, however, has tended to push us in terms of thinking using linear models and forced choices. Do we want tea or coffee? A consequence is that human resource professionals have shaped most thinking regarding personnel, while these professionals are using profiling instruments which owe their origin to American or Anglo-Saxon philosophy, because the United States dominated so much of the world after World War II. This philosophy emphasizes a cultural signature focusing on linear scales. And so he makes these references to clearly he's writing this book for people who are in business field, right? So for example, Kearton's KIA model at its basic level directs the utilizer to think in terms of profiling staff as either an adapter or an innovator. It does not emphasize how to combine these attributes. The measurement of creativity is typically at the linear level, that is, how much instead of the end, nature, and form of creativity, and how to harness and link to its adaptation. So, of course, on Wikipedia, there's always an entry for these references. So you click on here, and this is what I got when I looked up Kearton's cognitive style, whatever that is. It says, make sure I'm sharing the screen here. And yeah, so here you see the reference to Kearton. So cognitive style or thinking style is a concept used in cognitive psychology to describe the way individuals think, perceive, and remember information. So there's what comes up when you type in Kearton's KIA model. This is what comes up. It redirects you here. So redirect from Michael John Kearton. So, I mean, I didn't know this, but evidently Kearton's focus on cognitive style. And so again, what Trompenaars and Hampton Turner want to highlight is that, in fact, people are not just innovators and adapters; they can be both. And so back to those notes. Okay, so close that. And okay. So according to this philosophy, all team roles must be present in a group in order for the group to become an effective team. How to combine these contrasting roles is to make them work together is not a primary focus in according to this approach. So implementers who are adaptive face incentives to halt more innovations and freeze design in order to deliver the current idea, even while innovative idea-generating plants seek to make contributions. And they say it becomes even more challenging with a multicultural innovative team, adding more tensions and resolving their contrasting orientation. So not only do you have difference in cognitive style among Americans or Koreans or Cambodians or Belgians, then you got the multicultural differences as well. And he's claiming, I told you, he's really into this, they're really into this yin-yang approach. This, right? Combining differences is a necessity for innovation. To do so requires identification of the dilemmas that emerge from personality differences, team role preferences, and culture or value differences. Culture or value differences come from national, ethnic, or corporate cultures. So again, they remind you in summarizing some points in the book that all people share similar dilemmas in terms of satisfying their needs and wants and drives. The initial approach to satisfying their needs and wants and drives is, however, determined by culture. So for example, should we be in our management and staff hands-on and directing, or on the other hand, should we be empowering staff to innovate and be self-controlling? And so the autonomy of an organization's people and ability to connect, centralize, and coordinate the ideas arising from this autonomy will determine the realization of innovative potential. And they don't provide you with any concrete examples. Like they don't talk about, rarely they talk about, there's some reference to Apple iPhone here, but like, how do you reconcile these different cultural values in big tech? And that requires some thought. I mean, I just know from the American perspective, big tech would not be big tech without the Defense Department. I mean, why is it in Silicon Valley in San Francisco? Because the US big research laboratories set up in the 1930s and 40s during the World War II and afterwards, they were set up in California. There's big NASA laboratories out there. This is where the research was being conducted for American national security, military stuff. So it's not a coincidence that it's all out there in California, Silicon Valley. So when I think about if you're going to work in South Korea in big tech and you're going to partner with Americans, you're going to have to talk about national security because that's what Americans understand. Like we got to compete with China, we got to compete with North Korea or whomever, or Japan, but particularly China, right? We're at the potential of an innovative team from integrating opposites rather than pushing everyone to think the same way. That's where innovation comes from integrating opposites. So there'll be potential conflict and misunderstanding if its members play different roles and have different cultural orientations. So they note that, for example, when in their work with mid-level managers, in their workshops, Trump and Hampton Turner, but when they simply ask members of the senior team and organization what dilemmas they faced in working with members that had opposite roles, whatever opposite means, like, is human resource the opposite of manufacturing? That doesn't make any sense, but people tend to think that way in their cultural conditions. Like there's manufacturing and then there's sales. The sales department and the manufacturing department. Like somehow they're opposite. They're not opposite, but that's what Americans think, that manufacturers and research and development works over here and marketing works over here. But they're not opposite. But if you ask people to think in terms of opposites, and how they have to think to how to reconcile these concerns, they generate new insights into how these team members were working with the others in terms of understanding their past experiences. They were typically quite able to be creative in reconciling their own team role with the opposites of roles of the other team members. So how can human resources directors help guide their organization? Any single corporate culture has its own strengths and weaknesses. At any point in time, most organizations have a single dominant corporate culture which struggles with less dominant orientations. So, again, a lot of this is very abstract in general, and it's kind of a sensitive topic, but I mean, when I read the New York Times business section, look, when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we also mentioned that 80% of people's social interaction with other human beings happens through their career, their job. And, people are often looking for intimacy. They want affection. They want to find a girlfriend or a boyfriend and maybe get married. And where are they going to find that or look for that? And on their job is where they're going to meet most of the people they interact with during the day. So this issue of single dominant corporate culture, the way it comes up a lot in the media is that a lot of these dominant corporate cultures are very hypermasculine. Like that's a theme of big tech, always emerging now in New York Times, that these companies that make new apps for games, they're dominated by men. And the women who work for them, they often get subject to harassment. Comments that are not nice, people making romantic approaches to them. And so this notion of dominant corporate culture can be seen as an issue of, well, this is a problem. And so we have to make men stop doing this and HR is the department that has to deal with these complaints. But they're arguing in this book that this should be seen as an opportunity. Like, can you imagine? Maybe there's a whole section, like I've never heard of, there may be a whole potential market niche out there for women customers and clients in big tech. And you can find that and make that niche and exploit it if you have more women playing a more important role in big tech. So Sheryl Sandberg was the second in command of Facebook for 14 years. She's resigning, she's leaving. Mark Zuckerberg brought her on and she was chief operations officer. And so she announced a few days ago she's leaving. She's only like 52. And there's lots of comment in the business media about how in big tech, there's so few women. And one of the, and that has these unfortunate consequences of women feeling abused often in some of these big tech companies, or not just big tech, any tech companies, including like small companies making games, software applications for gaming. And you might say, oh, this is a problem. Oh, another, look at it as an opportunity. Trump and Hampton Turner would say, how can you integrate these issues to increase also your ability to market big tech items to currently unknown ways, undeveloped ways, to half the population is female. I mean, I know gaming is dominated by men. I mean, I have a Twitch account, so I go watch Twitch, right? And there are female gamers on Twitch, but it's overwhelmingly dominated by men. The industry is dominated by men. So look upon it as an opportunity, not as a danger or a problem. We have to change our male-dominated corporate culture. I think that's what they're arguing here. So the organization life cycle follows a series of transitions from one corporate culture to the other. A crisis prompts each transition. Typically, that's what happened. You go bankrupt. You're going to go bankrupt if you don't change, right? Or you're going to get a big lawsuit that's going to cause a problem, major problems, because somebody's suing you for sexual harassment, discrimination. Each crisis emerges when the organization outgrows the current culture. Frequently occurring dilemmas emerge requiring reconciliation to progress from one culture to the next. Each dilemma requires an innovative solution. An organization that is truly innovative deals successfully with each. I mean, this is all very abstract and antiseptic. I mean, I can just imagine, what it might be like. It's never, well, what's happened to me. It's never happened to me. Like, but if somebody claimed I was sexually harassing them, how embarrassing that would be. And typically it would probably happen because I didn't intend it, or somebody didn't intend to sexually harass somebody. But you're expected, to be friends. You're expected to enjoy being at work. You're expected to go out after work and go to restaurants and go to bars. People get drunk, they talk, they become friends, somebody says something, does something, and now you got a problem. And how do you deal with that problem? You fire somebody, or do you try to look upon it as an opportunity to change the culture of the company in a way that creates and generates more effective innovation? And like I told you, just to conclude, I have to say that was one achievement of the second vice president of the American University in Bulgaria that was there, that came there before I left. The president of the university told me he abolished the English department. He abolished the English department at American University in Bulgaria, and he had a couple of justifications. One is because students weren't taking the English major. They didn't want to major in English at the American University in Bulgaria because they want to major in business administration or journalism, or whatever. But he said every week he was getting complaints from students about sexual harassment from the professors in the English department. Every week he was getting complaints. So he used that as an excuse to abolish the English department and fire all the faculty. Get rid of them. That's one way to respond. The provost, the vice president came in, she successfully set up a sexual harassment complaints unit within the university that was dealing very effectively with those concerns, because I never heard one piece of gossip while she was there about any case of somebody claiming that so-and-so made a sexual advance towards them. Even though it was happening, it must have been happening all the time. I never heard of it. So she did a good job of setting that up. And as a result, the American University in Bulgaria, that's an expensive university to study at. It's very expensive for East Europeans, but it became very popular for a lot of people, partly because it was seen as a very tolerant environment. Tolerant for gay people. We had gay students. We had a gay professor. I know there's a gay professor there. He came out as gay. We had women felt comfortable there. And this is a very macho culture, but the Balkans. I mean, it's incredibly hyper masculine, obnoxiously so, right? Men drink, fight, have sex with women. And they created this effective institution that was good at recruiting students because it was seen as a comfortable place for people that were not typical. So that's it. And it's expensive to study there. It was, when I left, it was $12,000 a year, which is a lot of money in Bulgaria for tuition and room and board in a very poor country. And people would pay it. But, you know, so that's a concrete example of how reconciling these issues in a way, in a way also, so there's a resolution of the dispute in a way that people go on and learn and develop, and the organization changes to make it more competitive in a highly competitive environment of universities like you see here in Korea that are desperately trying to get students to come to their university. And this is the nonprofit sector. So view these conflicts as opportunities in a globalizing world environment where we're going to have these conflicts. And HR, they play a critical role in this. And you know, that's something that's interesting to me because, like I said, when I was 18 years old, getting a job in the human resource department was considered to be a joke job. That's where you got a job if you can't do anything else, and you're not going to go anywhere. And you're just, you know, there because you got to have somebody to look for people and take and process applications for jobs, you know. But now it's not just in the Trumpreneurs and Hampton Turner book, in the New York Times, they're always talking about the role of HR as the place you go to file a complaint about sexual harassment. Okay, so that's where I have to stop today. And I hope you found this interesting. Bye.